This is the story of the one. As a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility, he knows keeping the line up and running is a top priority. That's why he chooses Grainger. Because when a drive belt gets damaged, Grainger makes it easy to find the exact specs for the replacement product he needs. And next-day delivery helps ensure he'll have everything in place and running like clockwork. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We all know those GLP-1 injections work wonders, but that price tag almost gave me a heart attack when my insurance denied coverage. I was staring at a choice between paying my mortgage or paying for weight loss. Talk about a rock and a hard place. Then I found Elevate Health compounded semaglutide at just $58 with payment plans that don't require a second mortgage. Same medication, same results, but a price that real folks can actually afford. Visit joinelevate.com today. That's JOINELEVATE.com. Your wallet will be as happy as your waistline. This medication is not FDA approved.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola 3. I'm here for life, I'm here to die. Inside these walls, inside the wire.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. I'm Jim Chapman, and today I'm going to cover the crime and conviction of resident of death row inside of Bloody Angola, and that is a man by the name of Gregory Boo Brown. And we're going to go back to the early evening of October 4th of 1998 in the town of Clinton, Louisiana for this one. And for those that may not be familiar, Clinton, Louisiana is a small community in South Louisiana. And although its proximity to Baton Rouge, the capital city, is relatively close, it's a very rural area of the state. Its population is just a little over 1,000 residents, and it is just what you would envision a quaint little town still to this day in 2025. Things like the story I'm about to tell you about, they just didn't happen in Clinton, especially back in the late 90s. So I'm going to tell you about a guy by the name of Gregory Brown who went by the street name of Boo. And Boo, not a nice guy. He was a guy who was very familiar with what you would call the street life. And actually, this guy only had one eye because a couple of years prior to this incident in 1996, he was involved in a gang-related shootout where someone in pure A Christmas Story, Ralphie style, shot his eye out. So by this time in 1998, he was knee-deep in a full-fledged life of crime. So it was on October 4th of 1998 that Boo, along with a guy by the name of Jonathan Booth, another guy by the name of Brian Risen, another guy by the name of Brian Williams, and a fifth guy by the name of Eldrick Thompson, they decide it would be just a great idea to travel from Baton Rouge to Clinton to rob a drug dealer by the name of William Moore, who went by the street name Little Man. So they hop into a 1984 gray Chevy van and off they go to head to Clinton, Louisiana, this small town. At around 5:15 p.m., they arrive at a trailer home in Clinton, which they believed to be the home of William Little Man Moore. Jonathan Booth enters the residence. He's unarmed, and he's encountered by a guy by the name of Davy Thompson, no relation to Eldrick Thompson, who is one of the assailants in this story. So Davy Thompson confronts Jonathan Booth, and Davy Thompson was coincidentally a correctional officer. And he asked Davy, basically, where is Little Man? To which the response was, he ain't here. Booth then exits the trailer, but he returns, and this time he is armed with a handgun, and he attacks Thompson. They start fighting. There's a struggle for the gun, and Thompson manages to disarm Booth. However, by this time, Boo Brown enters the trailer, and he shoots Thompson in the thigh as he sees him get control of that gun. Now, Boo also by accident shoots Booth in the upper arm, his own friend. And at this point, both Boo Brown and Thompson, they jump back in the van with the other three guys, and they haul ass. They realize the heat is up now. We're firing shots in a small town in this trailer. Surely somebody's heard that. We need to get the hell out of here. And that's just what they do. They get back in the van. They take off screeching tires to get the heck out of Clinton, Louisiana. And they only get about 3 blocks before they get in a wreck. And what caused this was they were in such a hurry, they ran a stop sign and they hit a white Toyota Camry. And that Camry was driven by a 68-year-old named Sarah Cheney. Now, due to this wreck, the van becomes inoperable. And all 5 men, they actually have to crawl out through the windows of that van to get out of the van. But once they get out, they start hearing sirens headed to the shooting scene, because as they were making their escape, that correctional officer, he struggles across the street where his mother lived, stumbles into her house. His brother sees him, who happened to be at that house, and he tells his brother, call police, I've been shot. So police were already on the way, and they could hear those sirens in the background. And these guys, they're pretty sure that they're going to come across this wreck. And so they haul ass on foot and they run into some nearby woods that had a lot of coverage. It was kind of some deep woods, if you will. And while police are at the scene for the initial shooting, local authorities get the call that the van that they were looking for, that it had been involved in a wreck. And they knew these are the suspects in that shooting because that van was described as the getaway vehicle. And so they take off into those woods once they get to the scene in pursuit of these 5 guys. And in very short order, they arrest Brian Risen, who was one of the 5. He's caught actually at a car wash not too far away, and he's trying to solicit a ride to Baton Rouge from someone that was out there washing their car. That person knew something wasn't right, called police, and they end up catching him there. Now, they continue to look for the other 4 guys. In about 15 minutes after they arrest Brian Risen, something very horrific happens. So a guy by the name of Ike Roberts, he is in his shed and he's working on a gate for his horse stall. And his wife, Sharon, she was in the house at this point, thank God, when Boo Brown, Eldrick Thompson, and Brian Williams, 3 of the 4 that are still not arrested, they approach Mr. Roberts. Boo was shirtless at this time. He was very sweaty. He was out of breath. And Mr. Roberts noticed this right away and knew this guy's been running from something. So Boo decides he's going to be the spokesman for all these guys. And he basically says, hey, man, we need a ride to Baton Rouge. And Roberts, who's a 55-year-old man, he had lived in Clinton his entire life. He knew everyone who lived in Clinton. Small town. He went to school there, born and raised there. And he knew one thing for sure. He didn't know none of these cats, and they were not from Clinton, Louisiana. So basically, he says, no, I'm not giving you a ride anywhere. And he was honest with him. He said, I don't know who you guys are, but you're coming over here out of breath. You came through the woods to my house. You're running from something, and I'm not going to help you get away from it. So they offer him money. First, they start out with $400, then $500. They go all the way up to $1,200 to bring them to Baton Rouge. And this guy still declines. Mr. Roberts says, no, I don't want to do this. So they realize they're not getting a ride from him. And at this point, they get pissed off and they grab some rope and they decide to tie him up. Now, while attempting to do this, one of the men, Eldrick Thompson, he notices Roberts' truck, which was a 1990 gray Ford diesel. And he asked Mr. Roberts where the keys were. Mr. Roberts told the three men that the keys were inside the truck, which, y'all, this should tell you something about Clinton, Louisiana in the late 90s. It was nothing to leave keys inside your vehicle. You just didn't have to worry about shit like this happening. You'd leave your doors unlocked, your windows up, whatever. You didn't have problems like this. So these guys, they're from Baton Rouge, where you did not, even in the late 90s, leave your keys in your car. Probably surprised them that they could just go to the truck and the keys were in it. But okay, at this point, one of the men, he jumps into the truck and he attempts to start that vehicle. However, due to these morons not knowing how to start a diesel, they couldn't even get the truck started. See, with a diesel, you have to turn the key slightly and wait a few seconds because you're heating up the glow plugs. Then you turn the key the rest of the way. But these fools didn't even know that. They had no idea how to do it. So they're trying to start this diesel like you'd start a regular gas truck, and it won't turn over.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. So Boo Brown, he sees all this going down and he fucking loses it. He goes into a complete fit of rage when that truck would not get started. He picks up a 16-ounce claw hammer, full 1-pounder. And with the help of both Thompson and Williams, he starts beating Mr. Roberts with that hammer. The three men then take a rope, they tie it around Mr. Roberts' neck, and Thompson and Williams hold Mr. Roberts down while Boo Brown starts slamming this hammer into Mr. Roberts. Now, about midway through this assault, Thompson and Williams, they release their hold on Roberts and they start making their way back to Mr. Roberts' truck. It's obvious that Boo Brown has this under control by himself. He's done beat the shit out of this man with this hammer. So they make their way to that truck, and this time they manage to get it started. Now, at this point, they shout out at Boo to tell him, hey, man, come on. We got this thing started. Let's get the hell out of here before we kill this guy. But Boo, he just ignores them as if he doesn't even hear them. He's just in this whole nother world at this point, continuing to just slam this hammer into Mr. Roberts' head, arms, shoulders, whatever, over and over and over again. So Thompson and Williams, they wait a second, and then they're basically like, screw we got to get out of here. And they leave in Mr. Roberts' truck, leaving Boo, who was still in the process of beating Mr. Roberts. So I'll go ahead and share this with you before we move on in this story. Mr. Roberts, he lived throughout this ordeal, but barely. His injuries included a depressed skull fracture, a concussion, a broken left arm, a broken left hand, and the damage to his forearm, which he was using to block all of these blows from that freaking claw hammer. It was so severe, that damage to his forearm, that it required surgery and the insertion of a plate with 7 screws in it to repair his forearm. As a matter of fact, the attack was so severe that Mr. Roberts' right ear was torn completely off with the claw end of that hammer. He spent the next 3 days in the hospital and now is permanently disabled. That's how bad they beat this guy. They were trying to kill him, attempted murder. So Boo Brown, he comes out of this rage for a second when he realizes these guys have started the truck, they backed it up, and they're taking off down the street. And he thinks, oh shit, my friends are leaving me. So he climbs off of Mr. Roberts and he takes off running down the street trying to catch his friends in that truck. And Mr. Roberts, he somehow manages to get up. He runs into his house and he tells his wife to call 911. And as soon as he gets that out of his mouth, he collapses right there on the floor. So police get this call and they respond to the Roberts residence and they put out a bolo, a be on the lookout for Mr. Roberts' truck, as well as the fact that the truck was being driven by at least 2 black males. So just 20 or so minutes later, a reserve deputy who was actually friends with Mr. Roberts, and he knew the truck very well, he hears the bolo come out. He had a scanner on him, and he goes looking. He was in the area, and he comes up to a major highway. It's known as Plank Road. It's about 6 miles away from Clinton, and as sheer luck would have it, he spots the truck. But one problem, he was in his personal vehicle. He didn't have his police CB on him. So he had no way to call this in and say, hey, I've got eyes on this truck. And this was 1998, y'all. Cell phones were not prevalent at this time. So he follows the vehicle, and the vehicle eventually comes to a stop in a residential neighborhood. And the guys are just sitting there in the vehicle, and he sees a resident outside of a home, and he tells that resident, hey, call police. And as soon as he says that, long story short, Williams and Thompson were arrested without incident by this reserve officer. So let's get back to Boo Brown, who was stranded after his friends left him, and he was left running down the road. And this guy was totally unfamiliar with the town of Clinton. He had no idea where he was at. So where does he end up? Well, these small country towns, in many cases, family all live on the same road. A lot of times the road itself is named after the family. Clinton, no different than any town in small town America. And so he runs to the first house that he sees, which was 85-year-old widow Myrtle Roberts, who also happened to be Mr. Roberts' mother. Now, the first thing that Boo Brown does is he goes up to her vehicle and he pulls on the door handle, attempting to steal her vehicle. It was a 1991 Ford pickup, but he was unable to do so because the truck's doors were locked. However, he did leave a nice bloody fingerprint on that door handle that would serve as evidence in his trial later. So at this point, he continues to Miss Roberts' back door, and I don't know if he peeked in and saw her, that she was in the house, or if he just figured she was in the house, but he kicks the door in and he leaves a nice muddy shoe print on that door, which would be also used in the trial later. Now, once inside of the home, he comes face to face with the 85-year-old Miss Myrtle Roberts, and he throws her to the ground, just grabs her with such force, as a matter of fact, that she breaks her wrist as she hits the ground. 85-year-old woman, simply disgusting. He then demands the keys to her car, which this poor lady, she's in total shock. You've got this guy in your house. You have no idea who he is. He throws you to the ground. You think he's trying to kill you, and he probably is. And he's asking you where your keys are, and she can't even articulate it to him at this point. Her whole mind is in panic. She has no idea where her keys are in her mind. So Boo, he realizes this lady can't even articulate where the keys are, and he starts freaking out at this point, and he's just ransacking this 85-year-old woman's home, looking for those keys. And Miss Roberts, she lays motionless on that floor. She's afraid to move, and understandably so. And Boo knows that his time is numbered here. He doesn't have a whole lot of minutes to sit in this house because he's pretty sure that the guy he just beat the shit out of with the claw hammer is calling the cops, or the guy's wife has walked out there and seen him dead. He had no idea, but he didn't want to hang out long. So he realizes he's not going to be able to find these keys. And he's freaked out because he doesn't want this 85-year-old woman to call police. So he tears the phone from the living room wall. And this is back in the days when you still had a house phone, and it was usually hooked up to a wall, especially if you were older. And he removes it from that home, actually takes it outside, and he hides it, and then he leaves. Now, Miss Roberts, she also lives throughout this ordeal, thank God, but she's injured. And a neighbor actually finds her on the floor just minutes after the attack. And that neighbor ends up calling police. And Miss Roberts actually ends up at the same hospital as her son. Now, at this point, the frustration is at an all-time high for Boo Brown. His third robbery attempt in the same day, and all three attempts failed. So this jackass, he moves on to the next house that he comes across, which was the home of 62-year-old William Gay and his 60-year-old wife of 45 years, Ann. And William, he had retired from Georgia Pacific. Ann was a registered nurse. Together, they had raised 3 children. They had only lived in that home for a year when Boo came across them, but these were really good people. Just sad what happened to them that I'm about to tell you about, because they were really good people. So we're going to fast forward a few hours to tell you what we know of what happened. Police in East Baton Rouge Parish, they get a call of a car on fire in East Baton Rouge Parish, a red 1993 Ford Escort, and they put out the fire. And after they put out the fire, they see there's a plate on the back of that car. They run the plate, and it comes out that that vehicle belonged to William Gay. They have an address there when they run the plate, and they reach out to police in Clinton, and they tell them, hey, we just found a car in Baton Rouge with 2 bodies in it that we're pretty sure are the bodies of the people that this car belongs to. You may want to go do a welfare check on them. Now, the bodies sadly were identified of that of William and Ann Gay. In the meantime, police in Clinton, they go to the home of the Gays and they discover the garage door open. They find an unopened can of beer as well as a spilled wine glass on the patio. And in interviews with neighbors, that was the last time they were seen alive. They were out on the patio, just chilling, and they were actually cooking a roast, and they were waiting on that roast to finish cooking. And the way that we know that is that roast was still in the oven was still on, and that roast was burnt to a crisp. Now, an autopsy would reveal that both William and his wife, Ann, were shot execution style at close range, with Mr. Gay being shot 3 times, once in the chest and 2 times in the abdomen. And Miss Gay had been shot 2 times, once in the neck and once in the abdomen. So police at this point, they head to the hospital and they have pictures of Boo to show Mr. Roberts. They knew that Boo was responsible for a lot of this, but they needed that positive identification, right? Mr. Roberts, more than happy to do this, says, yeah, that's the guy that attacked me. Now, at this time in the process, Boo was the only one left of the 5 individuals yet to be apprehended. So you may say, well, how did Jonathan Booth get caught? Because he was the one that was shot in the initial aspect of this story, if you'll remember, at that first robbery attempt. And I haven't told you anything about him. Well, he split off from everybody else in this story in the beginning. After that wreck, when they all had to climb out the windows, he split off. He went a whole different direction because Booth knew somebody that lived in Clinton, an acquaintance, and that acquaintance only lived about a mile from where that wreck occurred. So he headed there, and he hid in that acquaintance closet. That acquaintance didn't know that. That acquaintance comes home, opens the closet door, and there's Booth in there with a gunshot in his shoulder area, arm area. And that person called police, and he got arrested. So at this point, everybody's in jail except for Boo. So a warrant gets issued for Boo's arrest. And they go to Boo's apartment that he shared with his wife and child. Yeah, you heard me right. This dude was married and had a kid. But, of course, Boo, he wasn't going home. He knew better than that. He knew police knew where he lived. So he's hiding out. He ain't going there. Now, 2 days later, after some really good police work and detective work, police discovered that Boo had an alternate residence in Baton Rouge that was kind of secret. So they go there and they find Boo Brown's father and a Pop-A-Lock employee attempting to gain access to a Chevrolet Camaro that was parked behind the house. So they go inside the house and the officers find the residence is completely empty, virtually empty, of any of its contents. There's a broom and a mop in the living room area, and they could tell that the house had been recently cleaned and sanitized. A neighbor informed the investigators that Brown's father had already made 2 trips to the house and removed items from the inside of the house. During their search, officials also discovered a trash can sitting on the front porch, and inside that trash can, they discovered 2 pieces of duct tape, a telephone with a smear of blood on the handset, and later that was determined to match Brown's DNA. And they also found a piece of gray telephone cord that had been cut, and that telephone cord was similar in color and consistency to the cord that was found binding the hands of Ann Gay in the back seat of the vehicle that was found burned. So they got a ton of evidence out of here, but it looked like Boo Brown was getting the hell out of town and his dad knew something about it. That's what it looked like. So on December 23rd of 1998, a confidential informant contacts the U.S. Marshal Service, and they inform the Marshal Service that Brown was in the Baton Rouge area to visit his wife and child. And this informant states that Brown was hiding inside a single-family, single-story pink house in Baton Rouge. Shouldn't be too hard to find, a pink house. A search warrant gets issued for later that day, and Boo Brown thankfully was arrested inside of that home. He had been a fugitive at this point, surprisingly, for 82 days. So he got away for quite a while. So on July 22nd of 1999, a grand jury indicts Gregory Brown, Boo, for the October 4th, 1998 first-degree murders of William and Ann Gay. And they're going to seek the death penalty. legendary prosecutor Prim Burns comes out and says, we're going for the death penalty in this case. Trial commences. Of course, it took a while, but on May 6th, the jury returns 2 verdicts of guilty as charged in the first-degree murders of Ann and William Gay against Boo Brown. Now, both of those verdicts and death penalty sentences were on the same day. So we know how it works with death penalty cases, right? The appeals are insane with these types of cases. And look, it's a death penalty case. I get it. You don't want to put anybody to death that is innocent. And, you know, since DNA has come around, there have been a few people that were let off. So I get the appeals. You want to make sure you got the right guy. I don't get the years and years and years and years that it takes. But I understand that you want to make sure you got the right guy in jail. I get that. Or, you know, in death row in this case. Appeals finally get exhausted. But as I told you last week with the Corporal Betty Smothers murder, the defense, they always go to this mentally not capable of getting the death penalty stuff. And they went that way with Boo Brown. They were turned down. This thing goes all the way to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, bullshit, he's completely mentally capable of this, and they uphold those death penalty verdicts. And so the one-eyed multiple murderer still today sits on death row 20-plus years after his conviction inside of bloody Angola. And there you have it. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases and more. Patreon.com/Bloody Angola Podcast. If you're enjoying the content here, check out Crime Wire Weekly. Kelly Jennings and myself release this every Friday. All you got to do is go to Crime Wire. Well, go to wherever you listen and search Crime Wire Weekly, and it will pull up. I'll also link the links in the description of this podcast, which makes it easy for you to find. Go check it out and follow it. I think you'll enjoy it. And until next time, for Bloody Angola, a podcast 142 years in the making, the complete story of America's bloodiest prison. Peace.
I walk a straight line, shackled and chained. Oh, gruesome Gertie is calling my name. There is no mercy in this penitentiary. Just ask the Hill String Gang or Angola